Hello everyone, Daniel Yuck here. Thank you all for tuning in today. I appreciate you. Within this video, I'm going to be sharing with you all how I go about tattooing detailed areas. Should you have any questions about anything that you see throughout this video or here, I'm going to encourage you to drop a comment down below and I will do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. I will leave links in the description for all the gear that I am using in this demonstration as well. With that being said, let's dive straight on into this. So in this demonstration, I'm using a Ghost Spider tattoo needle. I believe it was a standard 7-round liner. Links in the description below. And I'm also using a Mass Tour Pro if I remember correctly for this snippet. When it comes to tattooing detailed areas, looking at the design at hand and picking the appropriate needle is going to be crucial. For me, as you see, I believe I'm using the 7-round liner right here, and as you can see, it's a bolder line right there, and I'm going to go ahead and fill out the lines that I feel best match up with this specific needle at hand. So as you can see up here on this design, I do feel like this line would go well with the 7-round liner line weight. And as you can see, I'm using the best of my technical application. I'm using the best of my technical expertise to make sure that I'm applying these lines correctly, so that way when we start switching out needle configurations and using different line weights, it all starts adding up together, creating a nice high quality read on our tattoo. So for me, being able to take a look at the design and being able to confidently pick the correct needle configuration for the design is very, very crucial, and that's basically half the battle. Or at least for me, it feels that way. Half of it is picking out the correct needle configuration, and the other half is determining if I'm capable of even doing the design, and if I am, using the best of my abilities to apply the tattoo at hand. In terms of the needle size that I'm using in this snippet, don't quote me, it could be an 11-round liner. It does look rather bold, so it can be a standard 11-round liner. I did this tattoo a while back, so I can't remember off of the top, and for that I apologize. But as you can see right here in this area, I am adding dots, and the dots are pretty much the same size as the needle configuration. So for me, I'm always choosing the needle size close to the line weight on the actual design, which means when I'm creating the design in my iPad, I'm actually thinking of needle weights upon creating the design, even in the iPad. So from the moment of designing, I begin planning out the tattoo, even in the iPad phases of just getting the design ready. So within this snippet right here, again, I'm showing you the dots up close, and we're going to switch over to a different snippet here so I can show you some other detailed tattooing up close and kind of explain more on that as well. Something else I wanted to touch base on. So as you can see right here in this area, these lines are really close together. So choosing the correct needle configuration will allow you to get lines really close. Keep in mind as well, depending on what type of ink you were using and the setup, ink settles after we've inputted into the skin. So upon the healing stages, the lines do tend to bold out quite a bit. And again, back to what type of ink we're using and setup would determine how much the ink actually settles. So when you're doing lines this tight in a small area like this, you really want to be mindful of your precision, and you want to be mindful of the needle size that you are using. Be mindful of healing. Try not to put the lines too close together, and if lines are close together, then you may want to go and change out the design a little bit, so that way you're not left with these sort of problems. And when I say problems, I'm specifically referring to lines bleeding together. They can be avoided by changing out to a smaller needle, making the design bigger so the lines have more space in between. There's many ways to go about correcting that sort of issue, but it is something that I wanted to raise awareness. When we are tattooing detailed areas and there's small tight areas, we are more prone for the design to bleed in together, which is also something that we want to avoid. As you can see, I did switch to a smaller configuration right here for these outside lines, because I felt if I did another line with the 11-round liner, then I would have kind of blurred the ends and the line would have bled into the design right here, as opposed to having that space that you see right there. Something else I want to touch base on is right here, you're going to see me pull a super fine line right next to the boulder line right here. And this right here is where technical expertise, I would say, and I guess patience comes into play. Because if we're rushing, especially delicate lines like this that are so close to another thick line, they're supposed to be parallel with one another. So if we're making mistakes upon pulling these sort of lines right here that are parallel with another line, it's gonna show. So if we're wobbling in and out, or if the thickness is different, it's gonna show. If this design was on human skin, I would have blew it up as big as I can get it for the placement that the client wanted it on, just so that way these lines don't bleed into each other over time, over the years. So me personally, I would have known to just make it a little bit more bigger, so that way these lines are sitting nice, and when they settle, they don't bleed into each other. So you're gonna notice that I'm talking about bleeding a lot here, and simply because that's probably one of these biggest issues besides damaging of the skin with smaller needle configurations. One of the biggest issues is when we tattoo fine detailed areas and the needle size wasn't truly correct. Over the years, it starts bleeding into one another, and the ink will start settling in ways that we didn't anticipate and or want. Another very important variable that I wanted to touch base on, and I'm going to demonstrate that through this dot work right here, is how much ink we are actually putting into these tight detailed areas. So let's say we have a small area like the one that we are dotting up right here. Now let's say we are packing this area with black. Now let's say when we are packing, if we essentially overpack, which means kind of pack too much pigment under the skin, when it settles, all of that extra pigment is what's going to settle and bulge out, so to speak, if that makes sense. So I want to be real mindful of how much pigment I'm putting in each individual spot, and when I'm filling in and blacking out little areas and doing what I need to do, I'm making sure that I'm being accurate to the touch and getting the pigment exactly where I want it, or as close as to where I need the pigment to sit. So you always want to be mindful of how much ink you're putting in a specific spot, especially when we're using tighter needle configurations and smaller detailed areas. We want to be really mindful of how much pigment is actually going into tighter areas, so that way we're making sure that we're getting the most adequate amount for that area while doing what we need to do for the design at hand. So just keep that in mind, that when we are tattooing, we don't want to over saturate an area. We don't want to put too much pigment, because that is going to be the settling that we see, and depending on how much ink is put in upon applying the tattoo is going to determine how much settling the tattoo is actually going to do. So you can see in this snippet, as I'm pulling these lines, I'm moving at a steady, consistent pace that's correct for my voltage and my hand speed and my setup. So as you see here, I'm pulling this line slow, steady, consistent, and I'm getting nice, clean, saturated results. Now, as you can see, when this line is fully healed, the settling that would have happened would have been minimal, because I was in and out, and I was in and out consistently. So the healing should be rather consistent, if not fully consistent. Half of the healing comes down to professional application, the other half comes into good aftercare. But as you see, the same approach right here, as I'm pulling these lines, I'm making sure I'm hitting that dermis, and I'm making sure that I'm staying at an adequate speed for my hand voltage, so that way I can go ahead and saturate this specific line the way that I need it to be, so that way when it settles nice and consistent all the way across. Before we conclude this video here, allow me to share with you all how I go about packing black in tighter areas. So as you can see, I'm using a Stigma 5-round liner right here, and I'm going to outline the area that I'm going to need to fill in. And when I'm outlining this area, I'm simply approaching it the same way that I do as lining. I want to get nice, clean, consistent, saturated results. And upon doing this right here, I'm very confident that bleeding into one another won't happen. Settling will happen on every single tattoo, doesn't matter who applied it, but when it settles, I feel it'll settle wonderfully. And as you see right here, and keep in mind, this is fake skin, so we are using our imagination. Moving front though with the packing of black, as you can see, I'm moving with the very tip of my needle. I'm not forcing that needle in there, I'm just moving with the very tip, and I'm working the pigment into the skin. As you can see, I'm layering the pigment over one another by using small circular motions. And for me, this approach would provide me with better healing results rather than going straight in as if I'm lining. The settling when I approach it this way is a lot more minimal and a lot less apparent when I take my time and I'm using those very tips of my needles. I'm being real mindful of the application, how hard I am pressing, the needle depth that I am going, how long I'm actually in the skin. All of these are just small natural variables that start working together in unison once you start finding your workflow. So there you all have it. Those are some fundamentals that I am following when it comes to tattooing small detailed areas. If I didn't touch base on anything specific that you may have wanted to know throughout this video, I'm going to encourage you, drop a comment down below, and I will do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. I also have social medias all under the same name as this YouTube channel. I have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I would truly appreciate your support on there as well. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for me and ring that bell, as I'm going to be bringing more videos like this for you all. Thank you for tuning in yet again. You have a great day.